Okay, so what we're now going to do is just take a look around, firstly Node.js, then we're going to take a look at MongoDB as well, just to familiarize ourselves with how this is going to work. And if you're very new to this, hopefully will help you understand how and why we're connecting in this way or doing these things. Now, the first things that we really need to do is install Node.js and install MongoDB. Now, the instructions on the websites are fairly straightforward. So go ahead, install Node.js, install MongoDB, follow the instructions, and we'll go ahead and actually work with them now. If you're using Linux or you're using Mac or something like that, OS X, then this will be different for you. I happen to be using Windows just because I record on a Windows machine, but it's probably not recommended to use Windows. If you are using Windows, it really doesn't matter. It's going to work in exactly the same way, well, more or less exactly the same way, but generally you would set this up on a Linux machine. However, once we have everything installed, we're now going to get to the point where we actually have a look inside this and run a server.js file using Node. But if you haven't installed Node.js and MongoDB, go ahead and do it now. Pause the video, come back when it's all done or when you think it's done, and then you can follow the video and look at how everything sort of fits together. And then if you need to make any adjustments, you can do based on what you see in the video. So with Node, the only thing that I've really had to do after installing it on a Windows machine is just head over to my system properties under my environmental variables, and under the path here, I've had to just basically add the path to the Node.js installation, and that's all I've had to do. That will allow me to basically use Node in my command prompt. So that's basically the only thing I've had to do here. With MongoDB, I've got this stored just in MongoDB here, and the data file in the MongoDB installation instructions, you'll see that you need to create a data directory, and that's also in my C drive as well. If we just cd over to that, you can see I've got a data directory here, and that just contains all of the databases I've been testing with. So go ahead and create that. You also have this DB directory as well. I've created a few databases with silly names, but that's just basically an idea of what you need to do. So for now, I'm going to head over to MongoDB and bin, or binaries. So these are all the files that we could potentially run. We're going to be focusing on MongoD and also Mongo. So MongoD is the daemon that allows your Mongo installation to run, and Mongo lets you manage it. So let's go ahead and actually start with probably looking at Node.js. It's just makes more sense. So your Node.js server needs to be consistently running for your chat to be able to work. So how do we run a Node.js server? Well, what we'll do is just head over to our text editor and create a new file within our directory here. I'm going to call this server.js. So this is a JavaScript file, remember. So Node.js is actually running JavaScript, if you know anything about Node.js. So in here, I'm just going to, basically say console log worked or something like that. So we can go ahead and over in our command prompt, we can go ahead and actually run this. So if we look inside of here now, we've got this server.js file. We can go ahead and use Node to run server.js. And there we go, it worked. So this is what we're going to do in order to start our Node.js server that's going to listen for Socket.io connections and clients connecting and pushing up messages and things like that. However, there are a few things that we need to do, or a couple of things we need to do. We need to install server.io using Node Package Manager, and we need to install MongoDB using Node Package Manager as well. So MongoDB is just going to be a Node module, and basically all this is going to do is allow us to use this MongoDB functionality, connect to a specific database, and actually access our database. Socket.io is basically going to run on this side of things as well, because that's a dependency. We need to listen for connections. But within our front end of things, inside of our actual page, we're going to connect to the Node.js server and actually include the server.io or the Socket.io file from our Node server. So that might be a little bit confusing, but it might make sense a bit later on. So we're going to go ahead and use Node Package Manager, so npm, and we're going to go ahead and install Socket.io. We'll go ahead and just wait for that to run through, and that will go ahead and install it. So now if we do a directory listing, we get this Node modules folder. So let's go ahead and just take a peek inside of there. And you can see we've got socket.io. So that's basically the first dependency installed. What we can now do is go back to our chat. Went back too far. We're going to now install MongoDB, and it's basically just a case of npm install MongoDB. And that's all we need to do. Wait for that to go ahead and install. CD over to node modules. And we can see we've got MongoDB in there as well. So that's going to allow us to use this functionality from within our server.js file, which at the moment just console logs. So that's all we need to do for now. We will write the rest of our code inside of server.js and also on our page as well. So we don't need to worry about anything for now. We've got our dependencies installed. Now, in terms of MongoDB, let's just take a little brief overview of how this all works. Now, I'm inside the binaries folder inside MongoDB. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run MongoDaemon. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to start listening for connections. That's basically the database running. So that's our database running. Now, if we grab a new console in the same binary folder, let's now go ahead and just run Mongo. Now what this has done is it's connected to our database, and you can see that this has changed now. We've got one connection open. It's automatically connected to test. Now we can, this is quite strange if you come from a MySQL background or any other server background, but when we go ahead and use a database in here, it will automatically create that database for us. We don't need to create a database. We don't need to define columns. We don't need to define anything like that. It's very, very, very dynamic. So this is how it works. And it may take a little bit of getting used to. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to use a database called Chat. So this is basically our test database. So it's now switched to database Chat. Now this did actually exist in my DB, in my data folder, in my DB folder within data folder, but it doesn't need to exist. So you can just go ahead and type in these commands and you've automatically created that database essentially. So what we now do is within a database we have collections, which are similar to tables in a way. They're just sort of collections of data. So what we do is we say db dot and then the name of the collection. So the collection in this case I'm going to say is messages. So if I wanted to grab all data from this messages collection, I would use the find method, and at the moment that's returning nothing. So what we can do is we can go ahead and actually insert a collection or a record, if you like, into this collection. So we say db.messages.insert, and then in here we enter the data. So I'm just going to create use a sort of JSON string here, and I'm going to say name Alex. Message hello there, and that's now inserted that. So now when I go ahead and go back to db find, you can see that's given me that data out, and we've got an ID there as well, a name and a message. So this could change. So for example, if we were to do this again and add an additional field, this would work. So that's the sort of slight difference where we're not defining columns or anything like that. Another quick tip is if we want to go ahead and remove everything, we just use the remove method. And then when we go ahead and say db messages find, it just returns nothing. So we've now got a database called Chat with essentially a table, but more appropriately called a collection called messages. And we've looked at actually inserting data, retrieving data, and removing all data. So that's all we should really sort of need to know at this stage. You can go ahead and play around with it more if you want, but as long as we understand that, then when we connect from server.js, this will make a lot more sense. So with that done, we've now done everything we need to do, and we can go ahead and actually start to create our server, which is going to accept connections from our chat interface.